The box was never supposed to be opened. It was never supposed to be found. For centuries, it sat in the belly of a shattered vessel, buried under silt and salt and the crushing silence of the Aegean Sea. It rested in darkness so complete that no light had touched its surface since the ship went down sometime in the late 17th century, according to marine archaeologists, sometime during a storm that left no survivors, sometime during a voyage that, strangely, appeared in no port ledger, no captain's log, no trade manifest from any Mediterranean nation. The ship had no name, and the box had no explanation. In the autumn of 1987, a Greek commercial diving team was conducting a routine survey of the seabed near the island of Antikythera, famous already for another discovery, the Antikythera mechanism, pulled from these same waters decades earlier. The team was not looking for artifacts. They were mapping geological formations for an energy company. But 17 meters below the surface, wedged beneath a collapsed section of ancient timber hull, diver Nikos Konstantinou spotted something that did not belong to the earth. It was a box, bronze, roughly 40 centimeters long, 20 wide, 15 deep. Its surface was covered in green-black patina, the signature of centuries submerged in salt water. But beneath that corrosion, the shape was unmistakable. It had been forged by hands that knew what they were doing. The edges were precise. The lid was sealed shut, not by a lock, but by a method that would later baffle metallurgists. The bronze had been folded and fused in a way that made the seam nearly invisible, as though the box had been designed never to be reopened once closed. Mikos brought it to the surface. He placed it on the deck of the survey vessel, seawater streaming from its edges, pooling around the boots of 4 other crew members who gathered around it in silence. He said later, in an interview he gave only once, that the air changed the moment the box left the water. Not the temperature, not the wind. Something else. Something he could not describe, except to say that the sky felt lower, that the light looked thinner, that the space around the box seemed to pull inward, like a breath being held. No one laughed. No one spoke. They all felt it. The box was transported to a holding facility in Piraeus, the port city near Athens, where it was catalogued under a temporary marine salvage reference number, MS874471. It sat in a climate-controlled storage room alongside other recovered debris, timber fragments, corroded nails, a section of iron anchor chain. A preliminary report noted the box's unusual weight. It was heavier than a solid bronze object of that size should have been, significantly heavier. As though something inside was dense beyond expectation. X-ray imaging was requested. It was never performed. Within 3 days of the box arriving at the Piraeus facility, the first incident occurred. A night shift security guard named Elias Makris was found dead in the corridor outside the storage room. He was seated upright in a metal folding chair, his eyes open, his hands resting on his knees. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of trauma, no evidence of cardiac arrest, stroke, or any known medical event. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as undetermined cardiac cessation. His heart had simply stopped. He was 34 years old. He had passed a full physical examination 6 weeks prior. His colleague, who had been on shift with him that night, reported hearing nothing unusual except that at approximately 2:40 a.m., the building's interior lights flickered for 11 seconds. When they stabilized, the temperature in the storage wing had dropped by 4 degrees. No mechanical fault was found. 2 weeks later, a cataloging technician named Despina Argyris complained of persistent headaches, nosebleeds, and a recurring dream in which he stood in a dark room, unable to move, while something pressed against the other side of a wall, something that breathed but did not speak. She requested a transfer. It was granted, but on the morning she was scheduled to leave, she collapsed in the facility's parking structure. She was unconscious for 9 hours. When she woke, she could not remember the previous 4 days. She never returned to work. The incidents were not connected, not officially. There was no reason to connect them. A guard died from an unexplained cardiac event. A technician suffered what doctors classified as a stress-induced neurological episode. These things happen. They happen everywhere. They happen to ordinary people in ordinary jobs in ordinary buildings. But the box was not ordinary, and the building would not remain ordinary for long. In December 1987, a formal request was submitted by the Hellenic Ministry of Culture to transfer all recovered artifacts from the unnamed shipwreck to the National Archaeological Museum of Athens for further study. The request was approved without delay. A small convoy transported 14 items, including the bronze box, across the city on a gray Tuesday morning. The box was assigned to Dr. Ioannis Petridis, a senior conservator with 26 years of experience handling Hellenistic and Roman-era artifacts. He was methodical, careful, not given to superstition. He had handled objects from tombs, battlefields, and sacred sites across the eastern Mediterranean without incident, without fear, without hesitation. He examined the box for 3 days. On the 4th day, he requested that it be removed from his laboratory. He did not provide a reason. When pressed by the department head, he said only one sentence, which was recorded in an internal memo dated December 19, 1987. He said, "That object is not from a shipwreck, it is from somewhere else, and it should go back." No one understood what he meant. No one asked him to clarify, because on December 21st, Dr. Ioannis Petridis was found dead in his home. The police report was brief, unremarkable in its language, clinical in its tone. Dr. Petridis had been discovered by his wife in the study of their apartment in the Kalanaki district of Athens at approximately 7:15 in the morning. He was seated at his desk. His hands were flat on the surface, palms down, fingers slightly spread. His eyes were open. His mouth was closed. There was no expression on his face. Not pain, not surprise, not peace. Just absence. The cause of death was ruled the same as the security guard in Piraeus. Undetermined cardiac cessation. His heart had stopped. No blockage, no rupture, no toxicology findings, no history of heart disease. He was 53 years old and had seen his physician 10 days before the incident. All results had been normal, but there was one detail the police report did not emphasize, a detail buried in the responding officer's handwritten field notes, which were later archived and forgotten. On the desk in front of Dr. Petridis, there was a single sheet of paper. On it, he had drawn something, not written drawn, a symbol. It was a circle, bisected by 2 diagonal lines that crossed at the center, with a smaller circle inside and a series of short, curved marks radiating outward from the inner ring. The drawing was precise, almost mechanical in its accuracy, as though he had traced it from a source. The source was the box. Photographs taken during Dr. Petridis' examination of the bronze box photographs that were later classified and removed from the museum's public archive showed the same symbol etched into the underside of the box's lid. It was not decorative. It was not artistic. It had been carved with a sharp instrument deep into the bronze, with a precision that suggested ritual intention rather than ornamental design. No classical archaeologist could identify it. It did not match any known Greek, Roman, Egyptian, or Mesopotamian iconography. It did not appear in any academic database of ancient symbols, sigils, or religious markings. It was something else entirely, and Dr. Petridis had reproduced it perfectly in the final hours of his life. After his death, the museum's internal review board convened a quiet meeting. No minutes were officially recorded, but a former staff member who spoke anonymously to a Greek investigative magazine in 2004 described the tone of that meeting as controlled panic. The board did not discuss the deaths directly. They discussed liability, they discussed optics, and they discussed what to do with the box. The decision was made within the week. The bronze box, still sealed, still unopened, still cataloged under its original reference number, MS874471, was transferred out of the National Archaeological Museum. It was packed in a foam-lined crate, placed inside a steel shipping container, and sent to the British Museum in London under a cultural exchange agreement that had been fast-tracked through diplomatic channels with unusual speed. No formal research summary accompanied the transfer. No academic paper had been published. No scientific analysis had been completed. The box left Greece with less documentation than a piece of commercial furniture. It arrived at the British Museum in February 1988. It was received by the Department of Greek and Roman Antiquities, logged into their internal tracking system, and placed in a sub-basement storage vault, room B7, alongside thousands of other uncatalogued or low-priority items. The room was climate-controlled, access restricted, and monitored by a single security camera that recorded in 6-hour loops, overriding itself automatically. For 3 months, nothing happened. The box sat on a metal shelf, between a crate of Roman oil lamps and a wooden pallet of unrestored pottery fragments. It collected no attention. It generated no reports. It simply existed, in the dark, in the silence, in the cold hum of ventilation systems that ran day and night without pause. Then, in May 1988, a junior collections assistant named Sarah Linfield was assigned to conduct a routine inventory of room B7. She was 26. She had joined the museum 8 months earlier, fresh from a master's program at the University of Edinburgh. She was organized, sharp, and unafraid of the solitary work that came with cataloging artifacts in underground storage, hours alone in dim corridors lined with shelves of forgotten objects. She entered room B7 on a Monday morning. She worked through Tuesday and Wednesday without incident. On Thursday, she reached the shelf where the bronze box was stored. She photographed it. She measured it. She noted its weight and flagged it in her inventory report as anomalously heavy for stated material and dimensions. She did not attempt to open it. There was no reason to. That was not part of an inventory. But she did something that no one else had done. She turned the box over, and she saw the symbol on the underside of the lid, the same symbol Dr. Petridis had drawn on the night he died. Sarah did not recognize it, but she sketched it in her notebook, and she wrote a single annotation beside it, not consistent with any Greco-Roman period marking, possibly later addition, requires specialist review. She submitted her inventory report on Friday. On Saturday morning, she called her mother in Edinburgh and told her she wasn't feeling well. She described a headache that had started Thursday afternoon and had not gone away. She described a ringing in her ears, faint but constant, like a tone played at the edge of hearing. She described difficulty sleeping, and she described a dream. In the dream, she was standing in a room with no doors. The walls were bronze. The floor was bronze. The ceiling was low and close, and in the center of the room there was a box open. She could not see what was inside it, but she could hear something. A sound, not a voice, not music, a vibration, deep and slow and wrong. She told her mother it was probably just stress. On Monday, Sarah Linfield did not come to work. She was never seen again. The Metropolitan Police opened a missing persons investigation on May 19, 1988. Sarah Linfield's flat in Camberwell was found locked from the inside. Her keys were on the kitchen counter. Her passport was in the bedside drawer. Her purse, wallet, and identification were on the hallway table near the front door. Nothing had been taken. Nothing had been disturbed. The bed was made. A mug of tea sat on the desk half-finished, cold, with a thin film across the surface. There was no sign of forced entry, no sign of struggle, no sign that she had packed or prepared to leave. Her neighbors heard nothing. The building's external CCTV, which covered the main entrance, showed Sarah arriving home on Friday evening at 6:47 p.m. It never showed her leaving. The case generated modest media attention, a short article in The Guardian, a brief mention on BBC London News. But without evidence of foul play, without a body, without a suspect, the investigation stalled within weeks. By the end of the summer, it had been downgraded to an inactive file. Inside the British Museum, the response was different and far more quiet. Sarah's inventory report had been submitted before her disappearance. It sat in the departmental filing system, reviewed by her supervisor, a senior curator named Dr. Malcolm Hesse. He read her notes on the bronze box. He read her annotation about the unusual symbol. And he did something that would later prove significant. He pulled the acquisition file that had accompanied the box from Athens. The file was thin, disturbingly thin. A single transfer form, a customs declaration, a brief physical description, dimensions, weight, estimated period. No provenance research, no conservation notes, no photographs from the Greek team's examination, and no mention anywhere of the 2 deaths connected to the object in Greece. Dr. Hesse found this unusual. He made inquiries through the museum's International Liaison Office, requesting the full research file from the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. The response took 6 weeks. When it arrived, it was a single-page letter stating that all documentation related to artifact MS-87-4471 had been misplaced during an internal archive reorganization and could not be located at that time. Hesse did not believe this. But he was a curator, not an investigator. He filed the correspondence, noted the discrepancy, and moved on. He did not, however, move on from the box. Over the following months, he returned to room B7 several times. He examined the box himself. He photographed the same symbol Sarah had sketched, the same symbol Dr. Petrides had drawn before dying. He brought the photographs to colleagues in the department, then to specialists in Near Eastern antiquities, then to a visiting professor of ancient Semitic languages from the University of Chicago. None of them could identify it. But the visiting professor, Dr. Ruth Abramson, said something that Hesse recorded in his personal research journal. She said the symbol's structure reminded her of protective sigils found in certain pre-Christian Mediterranean traditions. Not Greek, not Roman, older, possibly Phoenician, possibly connected to funerary practices specifically, to the containment of objects believed to hold spiritual contamination. In other words, the symbol was not a label. It was a warning. It was a seal, and whatever was inside the box, it had been locked in, deliberately, by people who believed that opening it would release something that should not be released. Dr. Hesse wrote in his journal, "If the ancients sealed this box with the intention of permanent containment, then the question is not what is inside it. The question is who sealed it, and what were they afraid of?" He never answered that question. In March 1989, Dr. Malcolm Hesse suffered a catastrophic brain hemorrhage while working in his office on the museum's third floor. He collapsed at his desk at approximately 4:20 in the afternoon. Two colleagues found him within minutes. He was unconscious, bleeding from his nose and left ear. He was rushed to University College Hospital where emergency surgery was performed. He survived, but the damage was severe. He lost the ability to speak. He lost most of his motor function on the right side of his body. He was transferred to a long-term care facility in Surrey, where he lived for another 11 years. He never communicated what he had found. His personal research journal was collected from his office by museum staff during a routine clearing of his workspace. It was placed in a departmental storage box, and there it remained unread, uncatalogued, unremembered for over a decade. The bronze box, meanwhile, was quietly removed from room B7. No transfer order was filed. No shipping manifest was generated through the museum's standard logistics system. The box simply disappeared from the inventory. When a new collections assistant audited the room in 1991, the shelf where the box had been stored was empty. The inventory record was marked with a handwritten note in red ink. Item relocated. See departmental head. The departmental head at the time Dr. Hesse's replacement denied any knowledge of the relocation. The box was gone, and for the next several years, it stayed gone. No institution claimed it. No auction house listed it. No academic journal referenced it. MS 874471 ceased to exist in any official record, in any searchable database, in any publicly accessible archive. It was as though the box had been erased. But erasure is not the same as destruction. Silence is not the same as absence. And the fact that no one was talking about the bronze box did not mean that no one had it. Someone did, and someone was making very sure that no one else found out. In 1996, a freelance investigative journalist named Marcus Crowe published a long-form article in a now-defunct British magazine called The Meridian Review. The article was titled The Weight of Silence, and it traced the strange history of several artifacts that had been quietly removed from major European museums under circumstances that defied standard institutional procedure. One of those artifacts was the bronze box. Crowe had stumbled across the story almost by accident. He had been researching a separate piece, a feature about the British Museum's undisclosed storage practices and the vast number of objects that sat in basements, unseen by the public for decades or longer. During that research, he had obtained partial inventory records from a source inside the museum. One of those records contained the entry for MS 874471, complete with Sarah Linfield's annotations and the red ink note about its relocation. He pulled the thread. Over the course of 14 months, Crowe contacted former staff at the British Museum, the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, and the Piraeus Holding Facility. He tracked down Nikos Konstantou, the diver who had brought the box to the surface. He obtained the coroner's reports for both Elias Makris and Dr. Ioannis Petrides. He located Sarah Linfield's missing persons file through a contact at the Metropolitan Police. And he found, buried in a University College Hospital archive, The medical records of Dr. Malcolm Hesse records that confirmed the date and severity of his collapse. The pattern was undeniable. Every person who had spent significant time in close proximity to the bronze box had suffered a catastrophic event: death, disappearance, neurological collapse. The events were separated by geography and time, connected by no common medical explanation, linked by no forensic evidence. But they were all connected by the box. Crow's article laid this out with meticulous precision. He did not sensationalize. He did not speculate about curses or supernatural forces. He simply presented the facts, the dates, the names, the medical records, the institutional transfers, and let the pattern speak for itself. The article was largely ignored. The Meridian Review had a circulation of fewer than 12,000. It catered to a niche readership interested in historical journalism and institutional accountability. The story did not cross over into mainstream media. No television producer picked it up. No major newspaper followed it. Marcus Crowe received a handful of letters from readers, mostly curiosity, some skepticism, one threat. The threat was unsigned. It arrived at his home address, not the magazine's office, in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, printed in a standard typeface, were 4 words. Stop looking for it. Crowe did not stop. He spent the next 2 years trying to trace the box's movements after it left the British Museum. He filed Freedom of Information requests with the British government, the Greek Ministry of Culture, and Interpol's Cultural Property Division. Every request was either denied, returned incomplete, or answered with the same bureaucratic deflection. No records matching your inquiry were found. He traveled to Athens. He visited the Piraeus facility, which had been partially decommissioned and converted into a commercial warehouse. He spoke to retired Port Authority officials. He reviewed shipping logs from 1988 and 1989, looking for any outbound container that matched the dimensions and weight of the crate used to transport the box. He found one. A container logged on April 3, 1989, 6 weeks after Dr. Hesse's collapse, had been shipped from a private logistics company in East London to a receiving address in Geneva, Switzerland. The contents were listed as academic materials, fragile. The sender was listed as a company called Ashworth & Klein Holdings. The recipient was listed as the Fondation des Lumières, a name Crowe had never encountered. He searched for both entities. Ashworth & Klein Holdings had been registered in the United Kingdom in 1985 and dissolved in 1991. Its registered directors were 2 individuals whose names led to dead ends. No tax records, no electoral registrations, no professional affiliations. The company had no visible business operations, no employees, no public presence. It existed only on paper. The Fondation des Lumières was similarly elusive. It appeared in Swiss commercial registers as a private cultural foundation established in 1962. Its stated purpose was the preservation and study of significant historical objects. It listed a Geneva address, a building Crowe visited in person. He found a small, unmarked office on the 4th floor of a commercial block near the Rue de Rhône. The door was locked. The nameplate was blank. A neighboring tenant told him the office had been unoccupied for years. But the tenant also told him something else. She said that once every few months, a car would arrive, always at night. Always a dark sedan with tinted windows, and someone would enter the building using a key. They would stay for no more than an hour. They would carry nothing in and nothing out as far as she could see. And then they would leave. She did not know who they were. She had never spoken to them. She had never spoken to them. She had never seen their faces clearly. Crowe published a follow-up article in 1998. It received even less attention than the first. The Meridian Review ceased publication later that year. Crowe moved on to other projects, or tried to. But in 2001, something happened that pulled him back. He received a package at his home. Inside was a photocopy of a document, a single page, typed in French, bearing the letterhead of the Fondation des Lumières. It was dated June 1989, and it contained a list of 7 objects, each identified by a reference number. The 4th item on the list was MS874471. Beside it, someone had written a single word in pencil: active. Active. The document changed everything. Until that moment, Crowe had been operating on inference, connecting deaths and disappearances to the box through proximity and timing, but never through a direct institutional acknowledgement that the object was considered dangerous. The Fondation des Lumières document did not use the word dangerous. It did not use the word cursed, but the word active implied something that no museum, no university, no government agency had been willing to say aloud. The box was not inert. It was not simply an artifact. Whatever was inside it, whatever property it possessed, it was still functioning, still doing something, and the Foundation knew it. Crow tried to trace the document's origin. The package had been posted from Brussels, but the return address was fictitious. The photocopy was clean, no fingerprints, no handwriting other than the penciled annotation, no identifying marks. Whoever had sent it wanted Crow to have the information, but did not want to be found. He began researching the other 6 items on the list. Each had a reference number. None matched any publicly known artifact in any major collection. But by cross-referencing maritime salvage databases, auction records, and declassified customs reports, Crow identified 2 of them. One was a carved obsidian disc recovered from a tomb in southern Turkey in 1974. It had been briefly held by the University of Ankara before being transferred under similarly opaque circumstances to a private collection in Liechtenstein. 3 people connected to the Turkish excavation had died within 2 years of the disc's recovery, all from unexplained causes. The other was a lead scroll, found sealed inside a clay vessel in the ruins of a Roman-era temple near Carthage in 1981. The scroll had been partially unrolled by a French archaeological team. 2 members of that team later suffered severe psychological breakdowns. The scroll disappeared from the French National Repository in 1986. The pattern was not isolated to the bronze box. It was systemic. There was a network, quiet, well-funded, operating across borders that collected objects like these. Objects that were not simply old. Objects that were, by whatever definition, active. And the Fondation des Lumières appeared to be at the center of it. Crow spent the next 3 years building a dossier. He traveled to 6 countries. He interviewed retired museum officials, former intelligence analysts, shipping company employees, and one elderly Swiss banker who agreed to speak on the condition of absolute anonymity. The banker confirmed that the Fondation des Lumières had maintained accounts at his institution since the early 1960s. The funding came from a series of trusts layered, international, untraceable to any individual. The sums were not enormous, but were consistent. Every quarter, like clockwork, for 4 decades. The banker said one more thing that stayed with Crow. He said, "They do not collect these things because they are valuable. They collect them because they are afraid of what happens if someone else does." Crow never published his dossier. In October 2004, his flat in North London was broken into. His computer was taken. His filing cabinets were emptied. His backup drives, stored in a locked safe, were gone. The police classified it as a burglary. Nothing else in the flat was touched. Not the television, not the stereo, not the cash in the kitchen drawer. Only the research. Crow gave one final interview to a small podcast that operated out of Edinburgh. It was recorded in November 2004 and has since been removed from every platform where it was originally hosted. Only partial transcripts survive, shared on obscure archival forums. In that interview, Crow said, "The box is not lost. It was never lost. It has been held continuously by people who understand what it is. And they are not scientists. They are not archaeologists. They are custodians. They believe they are protecting the world from what is inside it. But I am not certain they are protecting it. I think they are studying it. I think they are using it. And I think the deaths are not accidents. I think they are measurements." He was asked what he meant by measurements. He said, "I think they are testing its range. How close do you have to be? How long do you have to stay? What happens at 3 days? What happens at 7? What happens if you open it?" The interviewer asked if anyone had ever opened the box. Crow paused for 11 seconds. Then he said, "I don't think the box has been opened since it was sealed, and I think the day it is opened is the day this conversation becomes irrelevant, because whoever opens it will not be around to describe what they found." Marcus Crow withdrew from journalism after that interview. He moved to a rural village in Portugal. He stopped answering emails. He changed his phone number. Former colleagues described him as exhausted and frightened in a way that didn't suit him. In 2007, a local Portuguese newspaper reported that a British expatriate had been found dead in his home near the village of Algézar in the Algarve region. The cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest. The man was 51 years old. The article did not name him. But the description matched Marcus Crowe: age, nationality, location, solitary lifestyle. No British media outlet reported his death. No obituary appeared in any UK publication. No former colleague issued a public statement. He was gone, quietly, completely, the way all the others had gone, and the box continued its invisible journey, silent, sealed, active, waiting. For 15 years after Crowe's disappearance from public life, the bronze box existed only in fragments, scattered references in archived documents, half-remembered conversations, deleted web pages, and the fading memories of people who had once been close enough to touch it. Then, in 2022, a shipping anomaly surfaced. It was discovered not by a journalist or a researcher, but by a data analyst named Fiona Marchetti, who worked for a European logistics auditing firm based in Rotterdam. Her job was to identify irregularities in international cargo manifests, discrepancies in weight declarations, mismatched container codes, unlisted transshipment points. It was dry, technical work. She dealt in spreadsheets and customs databases, not mystery. But in March 2022, while auditing a batch of records from a Swiss freight forwarding company, she flagged an entry that did not reconcile. A container had been logged departing from a bonded warehouse in Geneva on January 14, 2022. Its contents were listed as cultural materials, climate-sensitive non-commercial. Its destination was a receiving address in the United States, specifically a facility in rural Virginia, approximately 90 miles southwest of Washington, D.C. The shipping weight did not match the declared contents. The container was listed as carrying 120 kilograms of material, but the freight charge corresponded to a significantly higher weight class. The discrepancy was small enough to be overlooked in a routine scan, but large enough to trigger Marchetti's algorithm. She dug deeper. The sender was listed as Fondation de Lumière, Geneva. The recipient was listed as Helix Conservation Trust, with a post office box address in Culpeper, Virginia. Marchetti searched for the Helix Conservation Trust and found almost nothing. A bare-bones website with no staff listed, no mission statement beyond a single sentence about preserving culturally significant materials for future study, and no physical address other than the P.O. box. The website's domain registration was private. Its hosting provider was based in Iceland. Its contact form generated an automated reply that said, "Thank you for your inquiry. A representative will respond in due course." No one ever responded. Marchetti included the anomaly in her quarterly audit report and moved on. She did not know what was in the container. She did not know the history of the Fondation de Lumière. She had never heard of the bronze box. She had never heard of Marcus Crowe. But the reports circulated. Audit reports always circulate. And somewhere in that chain of circulation, someone recognized the name. In June 2022, Marchetti received an email from an address she did not recognize. The sender identified himself only as a historian with an interest in institutional provenance. He asked if she could provide the full shipping manifest for the January 14 container. He asked if she had any additional documentation on the Helix Conservation Trust. And he asked, almost as an afterthought, whether the manifest had included an item-level inventory. She replied that she could not share proprietary audit data. She suggested he contact the shipping company directly. He wrote back once more. His email was short. "The last person who handled that shipment's contents is probably already dead. If you know more than you've reported, I would advise you to forget it. If you don't know what you found, that is the safest outcome for you." She did not reply. She deleted the email. She told no one. But the shipment was real. The records were real. And the destination, rural Virginia, 90 miles from the capital of the most powerful nation on Earth, was real. The box had moved. After decades of silence, after years of invisibility, the bronze artifact catalogued as MS-874471 had been shipped across the Atlantic Ocean to a facility that did not officially exist, operated by a trust that had no verifiable staff, funded by a foundation that had been collecting dangerous objects since the 1960s. And it had been sent to America. Independent researchers, a loose, informal network of archivists, retired academics, and amateur investigators who had kept Crowe's work alive on private forums, began attempting to locate the Culpeper facility. Using satellite imagery, county land records, and rural property tax databases, they identified a likely candidate, a 200-acre parcel of land in a heavily forested area west of Culpeper, Virginia, purchased in 2019 by a Delaware-registered LLC called Greystone Land Management. The property was surrounded by a perimeter fence. Satellite images showed two above-ground structures, a small residential building and a larger windowless structure that resembled a commercial storage facility or laboratory. A single access road connected the property to a county highway. There were no visible signs, no posted identification, no indication of what the facility was used for. County records showed that the property had been permitted for agricultural storage and research purposes. No further details were available. No building inspections had been recorded since the initial construction permits were closed out in 2020. One researcher, a retired military intelligence officer who used the pseudonym Arkwright on the forums, noted something disturbing about the satellite images. In photographs taken in late 2021, the larger structure appeared to cast a shadow consistent with a single-story building. But in images from March 2022, 2 months after the shipment's arrival, the shadow profile had changed. The building appeared taller, or rather, something near it appeared to have been added. A second structure, partially below ground with only its upper edge visible above the tree line. Something had been built, recently, quickly, and it had been designed to be difficult to see. The box had a new home, and the home had been prepared specifically for it. In August 2022, a user on one of the private research forums posted a brief, unsigned message. It read, "I drove past the Culpeper property today, took the county road, slowed down near the access point. The gate was closed. No cameras visible, but that means nothing. The trees are thick. You cannot see the buildings from the road. But I stopped the car for 2 minutes. Engine off, windows down, and I heard something. Low, steady, like a generator, but not a generator. It was coming from the ground, not from the building, from the ground itself." The post received 12 responses. Most urged caution. 2 asked for GPS coordinates. 1 simply said, "Do not go back." The user never posted again. In the months that followed, the informal research community fractured. Some members withdrew, citing personal safety concerns. Others accused the group of drifting into paranoia and conspiracy. One by one, the forums went quiet. Threads stopped updating. Links broke. Files were removed. By early 2023, the last active forum hosted on a server in Finland went offline without explanation. The domain was not renewed. The server was wiped. Everything Marcus Crowe had built, every connection, every document trail, every fragile thread of evidence linking the box to the deaths, the institutions, the foundation, the shipment, was scattered, dispersed into the silence of abandoned digital spaces, unvisited archives, and the memories of people who had learned, through bitter experience, that some stories resist being told, but the box remained. It sits now, if the evidence is to be believed, somewhere in the forests of rural Virginia, in a windowless structure, behind a locked gate, on a 200-acre property owned by a company that exists only on paper. It has been sealed for over 3 centuries. It has passed through the hands of divers, guards, technicians, curators, conservators, journalists, and analysts. And every hand that has touched it, every eye that has studied it, every mind that has tried to understand it, has been silenced by death, by disappearance, by collapse, by fear. The box has never been opened. This is the fact that should be most reassuring and is, instead, the most terrifying. Because whatever the box does, whatever effect it exerts on the people around it, it does so while sealed, while closed, while contained. The bronze walls, the fused seam, the ancient symbol carved into the lid, these were meant to hold something in. And they are holding. The seal has not been broken, but the deaths have not stopped, which means the seal is not enough. Whatever is inside is reaching through the metal, through the containment, through the centuries of corrosion and silence and darkness. It is reaching, and it is touching the living, and it is stopping their hearts, erasing their memories, pulling them into places from which they do not return. Dr. Ruth Abramson, the visiting professor who had identified the symbol as a containment sigil, retired from academia in 2002. She moved to a small town in Vermont. She never spoke publicly about the bronze box again. But in 2019, a former graduate student of hers published a memoir that included a brief passage about a conversation they had shared over dinner in 1997. Abramson had been quiet that evening, reflective. She had drunk 2 glasses of wine and then unprompted said something the student never forgot. She said, "There are objects in this world that are not objects, they are doors. And the worst kind of door is the one that opens from the other side." The student asked what she meant. Abramson looked at her for a long time. Then she said, "I mean that something made that box, and something put something inside it, and something sealed it shut. And the thing that sealed it, the people, the priests, the order, whatever they were, they did not seal it because they were strong. They sealed it because they were desperate, because they had no other option. Because whatever is inside that box, they could not destroy it. They could only contain it. And containment is not a solution. It is a delay." She never spoke about it again. She died in 2021 at the age of 84 in her sleep, peacefully by all accounts. Or so the report said. Today, no museum on Earth admits to possessing the bronze box. No government acknowledges its existence. No academic institution includes it in any database, any collection, any research program. The reference number MS874471 returns no results in any searchable archive. The names of the dead Elias Macris, Ioannis Petridis, Sarah Linfield, Marcus Crowe appear in no connected investigation, no unified case file, no shared record of what happened to them and why. The Fondation de Lumiere's Geneva office remains closed. The Helix Conservation Trust's website was taken down in late 2022. The Culpeper property still appears in satellite images unchanged, unremarkable, surrounded by trees, accessible only by a single road that leads nowhere else. And somewhere beneath that property, in a room that does not appear on any blueprint, behind walls designed to contain what cannot be contained forever, the bronze box sits. Sealed, unbroken, active. It does not need to be opened. It has never needed to be opened. It just needs to wait, and it is very, very patient. Some doors were never meant to be found. Some things were sealed for reasons the living cannot understand. And some silences, the deep ones, the old ones, the ones that hum beneath the ground in places no one visits, are not empty. They are full. And they are listening.